Per usual, everything on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. It is Teaching Tech Tuesday. Let's talk about data visualization and how things have changed over the years. Specifically, we'll get to price charts and alternative ways to view price charts. But as a data visualization nerd, geek, as a data-oriented, visual-oriented person, it's always interesting to look back and see how this all started. What was the evolution? And how can we use this to our advantage in trading? Obviously, that's not why we're all here. But I, of course, asked ChatGPT, as I usually do for these videos, just a brief history of data visualization. So this is what it gave me. And interestingly enough, we had candlesticks, at least history of candlestick charts in rice futures in Japan in 1750. Now, those didn't proliferate for many years, obviously, and become sort of the meme and the standard that they are now. But it is interesting how early on in price charting that was. Now, this was a very laborious and tedious manual process, right? They obviously didn't have any computing processes to do that. So that's probably one reason why. And as you'll find in this history, it was really the proliferation of the computer and computing power that led to more sophisticated data techniques. But some of these I had heard of course, the John Snow map of cholera. Some of these I hadn't heard of, and I don't think a lot of this stuff necessarily has remained as is, but it's certainly given the initial form of some of these data visualizations that we'll see later on in charts like this, where, I don't really know what this is telling us. It doesn't seem like a great visualization, but you can see sort of a combination of bar chart, pie chart. Complex ideas are just starting here, and we're talking like early, right? This is like 1780. So we actually had candlestick charts by this point, right? But obviously that took some time to make its way across the world. This is an early export-import chart, obviously done by hand. And it may seem trivial, but it's clearly giving a very clean message, a very clean viewpoint on what's going on with imports and exports, right? And that's sort of the goal of all of this, is how can we quickly give a visual message? And I think that's why we've seen the rise in data visualization over the past 75 years, really, because there's just so much more information. Everybody has less and less time to consume text, and there's just more and more information to consume. This one I hadn't been familiar with. This was Napoleon's March to Moscow. Interesting. Some of this stuff, I forget the waterfall, the flow charts in like equity, revenue, this type of stuff. Of course, it's impossible to tell if it's the first ever of its kind, but it's maybe the most popularized or documented of its kind. This is a radial polar graph of mortality, and I've certainly seen different versions of that. This is, of course, obviously the cholera map, very popular in epidemiology. Certainly brought forth the idea of using data and using data visualization to understand disease, and definitely played a key role in solving the cholera problem in London at that time. Fast forward a few hundred years, if you haven't heard of Hans Rosling, he's done excellent TED Talks, a lot on population or growth, developing world, emerging markets sort of thing. He's done a couple of these. Very, very cool data visualization. Years old now, but they've aged well. They give you a very big picture idea of what's going on with populations. That's, I think, his specialty. There's, of course, the modern day data visualization. This is one of my favorite visual capitalists. I would show you their website, but it's down for some reason, of course, for the video. I just thought this infographic specifically was funny because, if you're not becoming a trillionaire in the next 10 years, are you even going to make it, Anon? Not going to make it. But they do very deep, very detailed data visualizations on all sorts of stuff. So definitely check them out. Charter's another one I like. Very simple, but it's simple on purpose to try to get a message across in the TikTok generation, right? Very quick bites of information. I tell you what's going on, grab your attention, and then you can move on with your day. Chart of the day from CNBC, also very good. I actually thought about the misery index the other day, but more of the same, sort of pulling US economic data, global economic data, and not bombarding you with paragraphs and paragraphs of things and things to read. Now, when it comes to price charts specifically, I thought this was super interesting because when I think back to the history of like the newspaper and seeing like sports or weather or stock prices, I think most of that used to be just tables, columns, right? Not so much visualization. And they actually measured this. If you look at when charts started to appear in the New York Times, it was in the computer age, right? It was when these things were easier to calculate in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then obviously that took off considerably. And now you've got this marriage in all newspapers and all visual mediums of graphs, charts to quickly digest and understand all sorts of information. Before we go any further here, let me mention today's video sponsor, Kraken Pro. Kraken Pro is a complete overhaul of Kraken trading experience with a one-stop shop for advanced and professional traders. Kraken Pro enables efficient trading execution across multiple markets with a UI that allows for unique optimization tailored to your trading style. You can check out Kraken Pro at the link in the description of this video. Not investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss. Cryptocurrency services are provided to U.S. and U.S. territory customers by Payward Ventures Inc., PVI, DBA, Kraken. We'll take a look at a few different versions of the candle chart, Heiken Ashi line chart, and why you might use other versions of the data visualization. I think a lot of people, they see, especially newer traders, they see the candlestick charts, they see the wicks on some of this crypto stuff, and it really confuses them on where's the noise, where's the signal. All this stuff should be available on Kraken Pro. But looking at a line chart for me is one way to just cut the noise down significantly. Even if we take the cloud off, one of the reasons I use the cloud is because it's such a great visual overlay. But looking at the line chart, obviously that cuts off the wicks of the candlestick chart, which if you're a novice trader can be confusing at times. And this just gives you the closes of the period. I think most people know that, but a lot of the times it can really clean up what you're seeing. And then from there, it can help you better understand, okay, where's the support resist level? Where is the key point of control on the chart? Most of us, of course, know this the more we play around with various types of candles, but this method wasn't, candlesticks, that wasn't generally how things were done initially. That took time to get adopted. But one of the reasons I think it became popular and it stuck around is because it does give you deep information quickly, very instantly, right? Is what's the color? Was it higher or lower than the previous open of the period? Was there activity above or below the close or the open? And then from there, you can take it a step further and obviously look at candlestick patterns. You can look at chart patterns. Now you can do that with line as well, but it may be harder or easier depending on your skill and ability. So definitely play around with personal preferences here. Hollow candles is just another way to look at candles. Not my favorite. I prefer to see very bold imagery for some reason. That's just me. Heiken Ashi is interesting. It's a trend following candlestick system, and you can certainly use trend following rules along with other stuff. For instance, you can use it as a stop loss system, and you can say after a series of 3 or 4 candles, that's a stop loss outside of just the price level. You can also use it as an entry system, an exit system, looking at bodies versus the complexities of the wicks themselves. And it changes the understanding of the trend outside of candlesticks, outside of line chart. In candlesticks, the color differentiation can almost be too much sometimes because it may look like there's trend reversals or trend strength or trend weakness, when in reality, it's just directionally more of the same, more of the same, more of the same. And things can get clearer depending on whether or not you use Heiken Ashi. I don't use Heiken Ashi a lot, but there can be times when it can certainly be useful, specifically in trending periods. And I think entry, exit, stop loss takes a little more understanding. I don't generally see too many people using that. Area charts, I think, are more for other types of data. Not for me, but that's an option that's there. We've also got point and figure charts, which aren't an option on TradingView. Those are even more confusing, and I think beyond most people in their ability to read a chart or want to read a chart. Those have a huge learning curve. It's a system of colored X's and O's, and it's very confusing, but it is one of the early ways that charting was done. It's interesting that candlesticks have stuck around, whereas point and figure charting has not. Kraken also recently put out a experimental data platform called Kraken Labs. I'll put the link in the description of the video. But if you are looking for different ways to visualize data or different ways to visualize the market cap table, right? You see me on these videos. I go down the list here on the table and just look what's the volume, what's the 24-hour movement, that sort of thing. But depending on your screen real estate or your appetite for more data, there are different ways to visualize what's available to trade on Kraken. So I definitely encourage you to look around and see if there's anything you like. Some of this stuff, very interesting visually, very interesting to see what's moving together, what's moving in different groups at different time periods. The Evo, to me, is something that I would just put up on an extra screen. It's a series of 3D images and visually communicating what's going on with the leaders or the laggards or however you want to set this up, and is more exciting than a market cap table, right? Another thing they have that I think is pretty cool is this patterns section, where it identifies repetitive price action movements in certain time periods. And once you play around with this, you'll see what I mean. You can highlight or hover over a certain price level, price area that the pattern picks up, and it can show you, oh, this price action is like this price action. And I think this is interesting and useful to help identify accumulation or distribution. Is there a buyer stepping in? Is there a seller stepping in? Obviously, correlation isn't causation or anything like that, but when we're thinking about who could be doing what here, it's a very interesting tool to experiment with and look around at to see what is price action similar to in like the fractal sense, and then maybe a step beyond that would be, okay, what happened after the last time we saw this type of price action, right? Was it accumulation and distribution? Was it continuation? Was it reversal? That sort of thing. And you can look at this on any of the markets in Kraken. And on some of these altcoin markets, it's probably even more interesting because they're probably thinner, they're probably thinly traded, and there's probably more of a fingerprint or footprint as far as who's doing what on the exchange, right? It's very interesting to just play around with this if you've got some time and see what you can see, And they, of course, have all these explainers as far as what's going on. The Beast one is interesting, not too valuable to me, but you can hover over some of this stuff and just see visually leaders, laggards, and then volume, percentage, that sort of thing. They also have a network visualization tool where you can go in with an address and it'll show you the connections from a chain analysis perspective, if you're ever curious on any of that stuff. One other quick plug I'll make is Aggr.Trade. All sorts of markets, all sorts of time frames. Some people absolutely love this because it combines order book sizing, sounds, visualizations. There's all sorts of like casino type noises if you want to implement that. But I know a lot of people use this in their trading and day to day, and just to see what's going on all the exchanges collectively. So that's all I have for this one today. Don't be afraid to experiment. See what works for you. If you don't like candlesticks, that's fine. Line charts, just as good. Line charts used by many people for hundreds of years at this point. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.